I'm interviewing Dame Susan Devoy, who is the Chief Race Relations Conciliator and also former world champion in squash. So Susan, tell me about living life to the full, because clearly you are. Nothing that you haven't dared to do, along with popping out 4 boys in between.
Yeah, well, you're right, life is very full,
Yeah.
and I thought about that in some sort of preparation for this interview, that you know, I've been given lots of really fantastic and different opportunities.
But you've taken them.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
could have said no to this, but hey, you're up for it.
Yeah, well, I could have said no and I'm still here, but yeah, no, I think that's the great thing about life. And you know, for me personally, it was really about taking opportunities, because you know, when I retired from a sporting career, it's not something you can go back to. Mother Nature prevents you from doing that, so you have to, you know, reinvent yourself all the time.
So how did you reinvent yourself?
Well, I think, you know,
Go
a
from
lot of
being a world champion, and then you had four. I mean, next thing I knew, you had four sons.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I retired when I was 30. You know, I was very keen to have a family. Someone had said to me, you know, I'm going to transport you in time, Susan, and in 5 years' time you're going to have 4 sons under 5 years. Well, I probably would have only had 2 and kept playing squash for another few years. But I think the changing point in my life was really when I walked the length of New Zealand in 1988 to raise money for muscular dystrophy. I think that was really, aside from my upbringing, was, I suppose, the catalyst to finally understand that I was born with a gift, you know, that I had a talent and I was given every opportunity to use it. You know, I never was sort of regretful that I wasn't a golfer or a tennis player or made mega, you know, millions of dollars. But doing that walk really made me realise, as cliched as it is, just how lucky I was. And sort of being around people that were severely vulnerable sort of shaped the next phase of my life, how I got involved into sort of different charitable organisations, particularly the Halberg Trust and others, and I really enjoyed that sort of stuff. So from then, as well as, you know, I could fit that in with having a family, that led to sort of, I suppose, not just being involved at the grassroots, at the coalface, you know, the sort of governance side of things, and then a few opportunities to sit on some Crown entities, and you know, I ran a regional sports trust, and so I went from there. But you know, I was able to really, I was lucky because I could juggle that with my family, you know, so it was always being able to fit around that, because that was pretty challenging, and still is. And then...
How old are your children now?
They're 20, 19, 18 and 16.
Wow. So they still need their mother?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you get the odd email or text in the middle of the night that they need some money, or a help out of a precarious situation. But yeah, I think the responsibility of parenting never goes away. But I've, you know, so far I've done a good job, or they've done a good job. That's certainly been the most difficult.
So what are you trying to do with yourself? What is your legacy, Susan? I mean, it's obvious, I suppose, but what is your legacy?
Well, I think in having 4 sons, you know, raising 4 good young men is pretty important, and pretty significant, really.
It is.
I mean, they're the future, but they're also the present. You know, we talk about our children being the future, but they're also the present. I mean, you know, I've got a son studying in America. I've got a son studying at Canterbury. I've got one still trying to find himself and one still at school, you know, so I just want them to be really, really, really good people. And I think, you know, all the things that I've done in my life is as much as by osmosis they've realised that, you know, life's not all just about, you know, about taking, it's about giving too, and how we measure success is really, really, really different. And I think, you know, people don't know that you've had your ups and downs in life, and everybody has. Yes. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, success for me is not measured in terms of financial, but certainly in terms of your family unit, and certainly of the contribution you can make to your country. And that's really, I suppose, if anyone said to me would I, you know, like to work for the Human Rights Commission, I probably would have thought earlier that it would be in the disability sort of field and sector. Sure. But why not? You know, just because I'm a white Pākehā woman doesn't mean that I don't have the skills. Was
that why you were such a great squash player, that you're always up for it, that you're fearless?
Yeah, I used to be fearless, but I don't know whether age mellows you, matures you, or you get the mojo shaken out of you. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I was pretty fearless, and I think then nothing anyone said or did could ever change me or affect me, and I think that's probably a disadvantage. Was that what
made you a world champion?
I think what made me a world champion is that I was just extraordinarily passionate about what I did, and you know, I hear lots of people say they're passionate about sorts of things, but passion actually means just about being prepared to give up everything else to, you know, achieve your goals. I I mean, the thing for me is I love training as much as I loved competing and winning. So, you know, I love to get up every day and train and work my absolute, you know, what off. It was something that I enjoyed. And, you know, I loved the thrill of the competition, you know.
Right.
I loved the chase as much as, you know, the winning was more of a relief. It was like, phew, thank God that's over.
And is that still the same now?
Do
you still love squash? Do you still play?
Oh, no, I don't love squash. I'm still really competitive. I've just can't find too many things that I can be competitive at. That sort of give you that same adrenaline buzz. No,
Right.
you know, thankfully, probably I'm not. As
do you run? What do you do?
I run. I've run a few marathons. But you know, as you get older, you get injured.
Yeah, you do.
And I suppose you start understanding that you need to lower your expectations.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit or a lot. But I do. You know, I've still got a few things I'd like to achieve. You know, I'd like to run another couple of decent marathons. I'd love to. You know, do all the great walks in New Zealand. I'd love to do the Camino de Santiago walk across Spain.
Yeah,
and
so do I. We should do it together.
Yeah.
It only takes 6 weeks. Apparently it's 700 kilometres. How far can you walk every day?
Well, you know, I've walked a few kilometres in my time. So, but no, I'd like to do something like that because I think, you know, for me, exercise is still really important.
Yeah, understood.
Clearing the cobwebs. Interestingly enough, I played a sport that was within 4 concrete walls or 4 glass walls, and now, you know, I can't stand going to the gym or anything like that. I just love being outside.
Being outside, yeah, very similar. So tell me about your bucket list. I mean, what else is on it?
Oh, well, I suppose you have a bucket list and you think you're going to do that when you're older and you're able to retire, you know, and then time creeps up on you and it's here and you think,
20 good years. 20 good summers, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know...
Well, I've just turned 50, so that's what Martin Hawes said, didn't it? 20 good summers.
Precisely, he said 20 good summers, so you think, okay, when I'm 70, can I still get to base camp, you know?
I think, you know, it's quite hard because you have to keep resetting your priorities when you have a family.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I say there for the grace of God, you don't know what's around the corner. And inevitably, I think that our children, some of them will live overseas. So being able to afford to travel and, you know, see them is really, really important. To travel full stop is really important. I spent my life travelling, but never in a sense of being a sightseer. No. So, you know, I'd really like to go, not all around the world, but certain places. And, you know, just being able to pick and choose, really, that is. I'd love to be a grandparent.
Yeah.
I'd love to be a grandmother, and I will selfishly say I'd love to be a grandmother of a little girl, because, you know, I've got 6 brothers and no sisters, and I've got 4 sons and no daughters. I think it's really, it's only fair that but that's terribly selfish to say, isn't it? But, you know, I'd like to do that. And I said, you know, being involved in a part of their lives if they will allow me. John and I'd like to go and live in Arrowtown for a couple of years.
Fantastic.
You know, we'd like to sort of...
Do you have a place down there?
No, we don't. But every time we've been down there, we've had such a fantastic time.
Right. It'd be great for the outdoors.
And it's generally in the summer, and we like, I suppose the thing we've decided to do together is sort of hiking, tramping, whatever you call it,
that's right.
that sort of thing. So, you know, I'd really like to do that. But I suppose ultimately I'd really like to be able to give all of my time to some sort of voluntary organisation. I've always wanted to set up an old people's home, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. Not an old people's retirement home as such, but
so how would it be different?
Build a really big house and have people who've got no family, but their families still love them but can't look after them, come and live, and they could bring their children, their animals, and, you know, we'd have happy hour. And I read a wonderful book about, you know, this happened in Switzerland, I think it was, or somewhere over in Europe, and you know, how long these people live, because, you know, my parents went into rest homes, and it was nothing against the rest homes. It's just a horrible experience, you know. And I had 4 young children. I couldn't look after my mother, and you know, my father died before our children. And I just thought, you know, of all the things in life, you know, I think in New Zealand we really struggle to look after our
so it's just like a big extended family, is it?
Yeah. So if your grandkids, you know, if your daughter's children are sick, they can come and we'll look after them, and, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I've talked for quite a few people who have shared interest in nurse and all that sort of thing, and it's just one of those, you know, funny pipe dreams, I suppose. Well,
no, you've done most of your dreams. And tell me, what do you want to achieve as a race relations conciliator?
Well, I think that's probably the most challenging of them all. You know, if I look back and think of all the things that have changed my life the most, this is it. You know.
What do you know now that you didn't know when you first started?
Oh, well, that's the amazing thing about this job, is one, you learn something new every day, and generally you meet some exceptional people, you know, who are doing your job for you, actually. And, you know, I think we live in a fantastic country, and I think our race relations record is pretty good, and you would probably attest to that. It's certainly not perfect. And my concern is really is the two trends in New Zealand. Is one, we've got an ageing population, perhaps that's why I want to set up a old people's home, and two, we have a changing demographic. And I think we've done really well through good luck, not good management.
Yes.
And I think we need to be very careful about how we prepare ourselves for the next 10 or 20 years.
I think so. I was listening to Paul Spoonley speak, because he spoke at the Bananas conference with me, and he was talking about the Asianisation of New Zealand, and I was very concerned to ensure that it remains a nice place to be an Asian, because I thought maybe this just means more discrimination.
Well, I think we have to be really careful that we actually do need to have conversations about it, being prepared for it, and having all New Zealanders have those really courageous conversations. If you look at the perception of racism now in the UK, it's deteriorated. It hasn't got any better. It's actually getting a lot worse, because you know, we need to be prepared for the changing face of New Zealand. And you know, admittedly, it's not a one size fits all for the whole of New Zealand. And I think we need to be really careful. Although you know, the Human Rights Commission has no jurisdiction over immigration, we do have the ability to talk about the impact that immigration has on the changing face of New Zealand. And that's what I really think is.
And if you had those conversations, you would find that a lot of Asians would say, please do not bring so many in, that it just causes a difficult situation for all of us, because people can't tell whether you're a new immigrant or whether you've been here for 5 generations.
Exactly, and you know, Asian includes the subcultures as well, so it's not just, you know, it's not just Chinese or Koreans or whatever. Yeah, and so we do actually need to have really good discussions and debate about that, and also about our young people, because as you know, it's changing. So our workforce is now going to be young Māori and young Pacific, and how do we actually educate them for being the future workforce for our country? Similarly, you know, migrants working in the aged care sector, if they aren't already, you know, we don't want to go down the track of continuing to stereotype, as you say, Asians in particular groups and Chinese. And the reality of that is it's just, a lot of it is actually scaremongering. They're not buying up all the houses, you know, and all of the things that are perpetuated. But if they continue to, they do become like urban myths. And I just think it's really, my role is about education and awareness actually. And somehow getting the truth out there. Yes,
understood. Well, we've tried to do that with New Zealand Asian leaders, as you know. And once again, it's simply saying to New Zealanders, there are fabulous top Asian leaders who are busy generating wealth and employing lots of people and doing lots of things for New Zealand Inc. Do you think that's a good way of doing it? I mean, do you think that works?
Oh, most definitely, And I think, you know what, if we're going to, you know, New Zealand is only going to be successful with immigration. You know, diversity is our key, and it's not just good for business, it's actually is good for New Zealand, and it is what it is. It is what it is now. But I think, you know, it's really about not just allowing people to, you know, come in at the airport. It's really about putting the welcoming mat. And it goes, you know, I think race relations is not about, it's actually about human kindness and compassion. It's about who we are as people and whether we've got common courtesy and manners actually, and are we genuinely interested in looking over our picket fence to see what our new neighbours are like. You know, and saying bring a plate or come for a cup of tea is not common in lots of people's cultures. So we need to actually make an effort. Both people need to make an effort.
You're very brave though. You're very brave.
Well, I think languages,
it's
you know,
a very tough job.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's all right. It is what it is. And I know that half the people will agree with me and half the people won't.
When I was an academic, I used to study race discrimination, and part of the reason I left academia was because it just made me depressed. I wanted to go out and do something else, because when you look at it all day, it doesn't fill you with optimism.
I think if there's one thing that, you know, I think could achieve a lot of my role, and perhaps there's only one thing I could do in the remaining of my term, because we have limited resources, you know,
understood.
Is to really have, and I wouldn't, you know, I'm going to put it in a terminology of a national plan of action against discrimination, but what we really need is an anti-racism campaign. That's not sort of, you know, doer and thou shalt, but actually, you know, there's some really good campaigns around the world. Even our neighbours who perhaps don't do race relations all that well have some good campaigns. You know, it stops with me or whatever. And I think, you know, what is middle Kiwis? What are they into? Sport.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought squash racism, but that was a bit twee, you know.
Well, it's interesting because I had a conversation with Robin Can a long time ago about discrimination, and we figured that if you could get an Asian All Black, we'd be halfway there to fighting racism against Asians, because in a sense, you know, it's something that we all love.
Well, I think, you know, I think it's a really good medium for the average New Zealander, you know, not everybody, but I think really there needs to be some sort of public awareness campaign about Because, I mean, the one thing that I say to people who are white, who, you know, sort of discredit me or think, you know, and I say, well, if you've never experienced discrimination, and you will have, how do you know how profoundly offensive it can be?
Right, yes.
And it's the everyday racism. It's the everyday little jibe, little joke, you know, tiresome repetitions. And that's really what it is, the everyday racism. And I think, you know, I talk to lots and lots of young people, particularly at school, and they experience it, but they're also mixing with lots of other different cultures. And so therefore I think our future is quite bright of the tolerance we see in our younger people is...
So what happens for you after this period of time, after Race Relations Commission? What next?
Then I'm going to hope that I can start ticking off my bucket list, really.
Yeah, that's right, because this is hard work at the moment. That's what you're focused on. Yeah. Tell me, just to end the interview, you know, when you talk to your sons about how they can make sure that they live a full life, really live life, what wisdom do you give them? Well, I'm always nagging at them, you know, but I genuinely believe, and a lot harder for young people these days with the cost of tertiary education to actually chop and change and find out what you really love. Yes.
But I think, you know, I often say to them, you'll only be good at something that you really, really, really love doing. You know, it's a real struggle uphill to, you know, do something, to start a degree. I know you've got to stick at things and that's the thing, but, you know, if you're not passionate about it or not going to love it. And the other thing is, if you're good at something, and my children are pretty good at lots of things, they're not. I said, you owe it to yourself to see how far you can go in
that.
Are
they good at sports?
Yeah, they are, you know, but you've got to explore your potential. You've really got to see how far you can go, because you don't want to be one of those old men that are leaning on the bar pillar one day and saying, well, you know, if only, or I could have, and whatever.
Right.
And, you know, we talk about the brain drain and all that. Well, I want my children to go overseas. I mean, sure, I'd love them to come back too, but I want them to go and explore the world and see what all there is to offer. I mean, it might have a greater appreciation of New Zealand, but I think, you know, above everything else, it's really to realise your potential and to understand that, as you will know, life goes pretty quickly.
It does. It absolutely does. And you will live it to the full. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm grateful.